Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool review for you from the brand Prometheus. A little bit about them. They were founded back in 2008, and basically they're a micro brand with vintage 60s and 70s aesthetics, really focusing on evolving that real, classic design of the past while taking advantage of today's modern manufacturing improvements, just making everything more accessible and more usable. Of course, this watch in front of you and the brand, basically Prometheus as a brand really focus on is dive watches. Some key common characteristics and design language. When looking for a dive watch, of course, you're going to want some type of water resistance, normally through a screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel and a diver's extension if on bracelet. And this particular model is called the Zenobia, and it was basically made in cooperation with the Divers Watches Facebook group, and it pays tribute to a sunken Swedish ferry and basically overseas somewhere. And essentially, it was really heavily inspired by classical military dive watches developed in the 60s, 70s, and a design aesthetic that you've seen even carry on into the 80s and be revived ever since. If this design aesthetic does look similar to you, you might have seen it. Essentially, this was definitely a well-used aesthetic during the time, and most notably, I'd say probably the original Squall, back when they were making cases for a bunch of different manufacturers, everybody from Hoyer to Blancpain, and then even for their own the in-house watches. So that's really where this particular design kind of picked up a lot of steam, and essentially this particular model pays tribute to that. It is essentially a $550 pre-order with a $100 deposit, and it is estimated for delivery in mid-August of this year if you're watching this in 2019. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. Okay. So as you can see, very handsome dial aesthetics there. And as far as the specs, they did go across the screen in the beginning, but briefly to cover, it is 43 millimeters in diameter with a 13.6 millimeter height and a 49 millimeter lug to lug. This is of course made out of 316L surgical stainless steel. The sapphire is flat and does have inner AR coating. As you can see there, you can get a good idea of the flatness on that. Now, as far as the bezel, it is a 120 click unidirectional dive bezel. I don't want to talk too much during that because you can see not much back play. Lines pretty well as well. So really nicely done. Even with these gloves on, it does grip very easily there. Now, of course, you can see this is fully loomed and fully ceramic, so really nice. Again, really taking advantage of kind of the modern, capabilities, and just pretty much how much easier it is now for brands to really offer something that is just so fully loaded. I mean, it's pretty crazy they can offer something like this for under 550. Well, for under 600 bucks because it's 550. All right, so the movement inside is the ETA 2824-2. You cannot see it though, but it is in there. And then as far as the case back, as you briefly saw there, it is solid and etched, and it basically does mention essentially the namesake of the watch, and kind of the history of that sunken ship. So that's there. It's pretty lightly etched. Nothing to write home about, but I guess if you're really into the story, it's definitely a nice touch, and kind of does add a little bit more interest to the watch. Now, as far as the dial, hands, and loom go, as you can see, fully polished hands. You do have the applied indices, very standard lume plots there. You guys have all seen this general layout before. Really nicely done. And then of course you do have the full loomed index and then the fully indexed actual insert there, which is really a nice touch, which you guys will see once we get to the low light transition shots. Now of course this does have this great satin orange dial, which is really great. And then of course orange is one of the most legible colors underwater. So that's always wonderful. So you can definitely make sure, you know, you can still see this bad boy. And then of course the black and orange combination, very classic and still looks very good. It does have the date at 3 o'clock, which is nicely framed. This is of course using Swiss made Superluminova BGW9, and it has water resistance up to 500 meters, which you would expect, especially considering that the 50 Atmos from Squall is also 500 meters water resistant. Now, a little bit of where it differs is going to be these beautiful lugs. As you can see there, they just drop down. They have that very nice fine bevel or chamfer, and you can see the transition is very nice, very clean, and that's something you always love to see, and is really kind of it lets you know that if they have the manufacturing capability to finish something that nicely, you know that kind of generally the rest of the watch is probably going to be pretty nice as well. So that's always a nice key indicator when you can see that that level of craftsmanship and precision is available, you know, and at their disposal. And then when they're able to execute like that, it's always a good sign for the watch inside and for all the little things that you can't see. So that's always really great. As far as the bracelet, it does have a 22 millimeter lug, and it tapers down to about 20 millimeters. Everything's all solid. This is a nice 5-link. It does also have the ratcheting clasp style here, as you can see, and oh, got my glove there. And then this is all nicely polished here on the edges, which I think is a nice tie-in. Aesthetically, you know, not my cup of tea, with the kind of the two-tone brushed and polished, but I can definitely see why others might dig the aesthetic, and it is actually quite comfortable. As you can see, really short links there. So with that said, let's go ahead and get this piece on the wrist. Okay, now as you can see on the wrist, it wears really nicely. And then if I get a little bit closer, it's going to look pretty large, but that's kind of just the way the distortion of the camera, and it's kind of inherent to taking wristies. So when you're taking those close-up shots, it does make the watch appear larger, but if you get a little bit more arm in the picture there, you get a little bit better idea of scale. You can see that this is going to wear really nicely. Now on the wrist, it definitely kind of has that Squall 50 Atmos meets Seiko SKX fitment, so it's going to be a little bit larger, but the case itself wears nice and tightly. Of course, you can see there the lugs drop a bit, so it does wrap around the wrist quite nicely. Personally, I probably would have preferred something more like a beads of rice on this, or maybe just a simple oyster that had a bit more of a taper to it. But it is super comfortable, I will give them that, and does feel super substantial, which definitely fits and is something that people that are normally looking in this kind of size range of the 43s, the 45s kind of range, what people are looking for, and I gotta say it definitely delivers on that. As you can see, that clasp looks absolutely beautiful, and then of course everything ties in with the mixture of brushed and polished finishes. So let's go ahead and see what this bad boy looks like under some low light transition. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit the lights. Now, as you can see, that BGW9 is pumping away really nicely and does have that gorgeous blue tone to it that you would expect. So one of the things that, of course, you always worry about when you hear that there are fully loomed indexes there on the bezel insert is, you know, are they going to be able to keep up with the dial? Because of course it's not going to be quite as thickly applied, and I think here they definitely did a great job of that. But my hot studio lights do a great job of simulating direct sunlight, but one thing is that, you know, you're not always going to be out in direct sunlight, you know, or in a really well lit room. Sometimes you're going to be transitioning in and out of a vehicle, coming into a building. So this right here, what I like to do is kind of simulate some of those lower light transitions, and then also give you a better idea of the color palette, because the studio lights do seem to brighten up and saturate everything that's underneath there. And it also does give you an opportunity to take a look at the brushing on the case and the bracelet there. You can see the way the light kind of plays off of them. Just gives you a bit of a better idea of, you know, some of the little spots where maybe you could catch a little bit more wear, especially with the polishing, and maybe some other spots that are just gonna have a nice highlight to them, you know, when it does kind of glint in the light like that. So really handsome piece. Definitely feels super substantial without being just flat out heavy. And the thing that I really like is, of course, the silhouette of the watch itself. Really pays dividends to the fact that it, although it is a bit larger than I normally wear in that 43 range, it's not gonna wear super large, which I think is really great. Now, as far as model variants go, there is a black dial, a green dial, a yellow dial, a blue dial, and they're basically all available with or without a date. And then there's also a meteorite dial with no date. As far as comparable models go, there's definitely a bevy of vintage-inspired divers in this scale, spec, and price range. So it's really one of those things where, you know, there's a lot of other options out there, but if you like this aesthetic, I'd say that's kind of the final word on this. If you can appreciate the specs, you know, and you enjoy the aesthetic, there's not really a lot to be upset about here, and there's definitely plenty to enjoy. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Also, if you liked the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.